So now we're going to be measuring the actual thickness of the rotor. And this is a special caliper for rotors. You can see it's a lot taller, so it can accommodate the thickness of the rotor itself, but it has this point, and what you want to do is you want to put this point in the deepest. If you look at the rotor, you can probably see that there are little lines everywhere, and you want to find the deepest groove in the rotor, whether that was caused by something that got stuck in the pad or whatever. But you want to make sure that you find the deepest groove and measure on that with this point, because when you resurface it, you want it completely flat. You don't want to leave any grooves in the rotor itself. So you want to make sure that you know how deep the deepest groove is and if that groove is within the specifications of the rotor. So what you would do is you look on both sides for grooves. Now this is pretty smooth. There's a few up top, but we don't really worry about that. And look on the back as well. See any? So then this one's really nice. It reads out right here just how thick the rotor is. And you just, because there are no major grooves on this, I'm just going to put it somewhere in the middle of the rotor. Take it down until it begins to ratchet. Like that. Lock it in place, and then read just how thick your rotor is. And for this one, it's 1.027. So that's 1 27,000ths of an inch.
So we're going to go into All Data, choose your vehicle, search brake rotor, click on the brake rotor and specifications to find your minimum thickness. Usually you will end up taking off about 20,000ths of the rotor. In this case we have plenty left to do so. Minimum thickness is 0.944 inch. So that means we have a little over 8,000ths left.
So you're going to start off by cleaning off the surface of the hub so it sits flat on the brake. So you just take a piece of emery cloth and then clean it all off. Get smooth, and then along this lip back here as well, and in this circle.
Pieces that center your rotor are found underneath the brake lathe. These are the pieces we used in this situation, but everyone will be a little bit different. So we started with that cap, the rotor, this is a centering piece of metal that fits inside really nice, the spring, the cap that matches that first one. That spacer has rubber to keep the vibration down, and then the reverse thread nut. You're going to want to give it a couple quick turns with the wrench to make sure it's tight, as you can see here. The important thing to remember when choosing the pieces from the last clip is that they are centering your rotor and they are keeping it from moving. This band we are putting on here is a vibration dampener. You want to make sure the cutting tips are the same distance apart from each other so you can make a clean cut. So this arm on the right moves it left and right, so you want to make sure it's centered in between the two blades. And this other arm on the left moves it in and out, and you want to get it just past the inside edge of the rotor. So once you have it centered and just past that front lip, you're going to want to loosen up that red knob you saw and tighten these, and you have to spin it from that back silver part to get the whole thing to move until they're just touching the rotor, which is right there. And then you tighten down the red part to hold it in place. And you do that to both sides. You want to be able to know how much you've cut. So you hold that back part and spin the front part until you get to 0. You'll know how much you've cut when you spin the whole thing. So you want to do that to both sides. So now you're going to flip it on to get the rotor to turn, and you're going to manually back it off and clear that lip. And that's why you went slightly in from it to begin with, because it'll get stuck if you have the machine do it, so you want to do it manually. And once you do that, you go all the way in until you're touching. Now that you're all the way in, you're going to want to loosen up the red knob and spin that whole dial so you go in 5 thousandths. You want to do about 5 thousandths on each cut from each side, so that's a total of 10 thousandths on each pass. So you set it there, and then you tighten down. You do that to both sides. So you turn the machine on to get the rotor spinning, and then you pull this handle forward towards you, and that is a fast cut, and if you go backwards, it's a slow cut. You're always going to do a minimum of 2 passes, so your first cut can always be fast. After you have manually moved the machine all the way back down, you're going to loosen up the red handle and turn the dial until you're at 10 thousandths. So that'll be an additional 5 thousandths off of each side. After you have those set, you're going to move the machine to slow, which is pulling that red handle back. It is important that anytime you think the cut may be your last one, you want to cut on slow because it'll leave less ridges in the rotor. After you've done your final cut, you're going to want to flip the machine on and get the rotor turning, and get a piece of emery cloth and sand just lightly, drag it across the rotor and smooth it out on both sides. At this point, you will remeasure and see how much you actually took off your rotor. To finish the job, wipe the rotor off with brake clean and a rag.